I'm Sherry Johnson, and I am a horse enthusiast.
Hey, fruit boy.
I grew up in Pleasant Grove, Alabama, in a neighborhood full of boys, so I had to be tough, and I also had a brother left at home, and he was 8 years older than I was.
She lived across the street from me as long as I could remember, and we just always hooked up with other guys around because, of course, she was the only girl. We had a girl up the street, but she was my age, but she didn't play with us like Sherry did, so I don't know if that made her a tomboy or not, but she was just one of the guys,
I was first exposed to horses with my uncle and my sister. They were both about the same age, and both of them had horses. My sister boarded hers close by, so my parents would take me over there sometimes, and I'd get to ride. I just fell hard for horses, and my sister had a horse named Prince, and Mom and Daddy bought him for me. And I didn't keep him long. I remember riding him once, and then they sold him for whatever reason. Apparently, the love of horses runs in the family because I said something to my oldest brother about it, and he said there's hardly been anybody in the family that hadn't had horses. I wore my parents down. Eventually, they had to get me another horse, and my uncle's mare had foaled, and it was beautiful Palomino paint. I just had to have him. They bought him for me. I named him Patches for his patches of gold. Well, Patches was too young for me to do anything with him, so I said, well, he has to have company. And my uncle also had a pony named Snowflake, so they bought me Snowflake as well. A couple of years had gone by, and it was time for me to start trying to ride Patches. A friend told me recently that he remembered the first time I ever did anything with him was I just got in the stall and I started riding him. When I was 13, Mama had a pasture up here where we live now, across from my grandparents. So she moved Patches and Snowflake up here. That was fine, but that meant I could only ride him on the weekends. Well, one weekend, I was riding him up and down dirt roads around here, and I was so bashful. I saw a young man coming toward me on horseback, and I passed him. I was like, I can't speak. And we both rode past each other in silence. I told Mama about the incident, and she just happened to know the young man. And next thing I know, he and his brother come riding down the road. She says, hey, come here. You need to meet my daughter. And introduced us, and he's Willie Moore. We began riding together and had all kinds of horseback riding adventures. We became the best of friends. We're still good friends today, and we still ride together. Whenever I can get him out of the house, that is. Now, horseback riding requires you to be tough and have some grit. And when I was a kid, before I ever got my first horse and was over at my sister's at the boarding stables one day, she had me on her little pony named Princess, and she was anything but a princess. I was on her, and I had my hand on top of the saddle horn. She went under the hitching post, and my hand was pinched between the saddle horn and the hitching post, and I guess I passed out from the pain. When I woke up in the office floor, I was looking up at people, and the hide was gone off the top of my fingers, and she's mean. Then Snowflake, the pony I mentioned earlier, he was mean too. I was running him one day and had a friend on back with me, and he ran me and her under a pyracantha bush, and we were pulling thorns out of our scalp. He did it to knock us off.
And we are ready to go.
The older I got, the more experience I got, the more brave I got, to the point of stupidity. I was over at Willie's a couple of days before Christmas. He'd gotten a Polaroid Insta camera, and I had a Kodak Instant camera, and we decided to take pictures of each other rearing our horses up. Willie and I have always been competitive. That day, we decided to swap horses, and he swore up and down he had reared my horse higher than I could rear his. I couldn't let him get away with that, and I had a plan. It's like, okay, I got on Blaze, I reared him up, and I pulled him back again, and all I remember is his ears. My head hit the concrete block wall behind me. I didn't realize how close I was to it. Fell to the ground, unconscious, had seizures, everything, had a concussion and fracture. Mom and Daddy rushed me to the hospital, and it was 2 days later before I actually came to and found out what actually happened. They thought I was going to be a vegetable for life because they saw blood clot at first, but 2 days later the blood clot was gone. So here I am. I hadn't stopped horses. I think only death itself will ever put a stop to it. I plan on riding as long as I can. Years later, I got married, and we still had Patches, but we didn't have a place to keep him. So I sold him to Willie, and we had children, 2 boys. So I devoted the next 12 to 13 years to raising them and being a stay-at-home mom. No horses. One day, we decided we wanted to take them to the state park, and we went to the stables there, and the youngest one wanted to go horseback riding. So we rented a couple of horses and went out on a trail ride. He fell in love with them. So I decided I had to do something to bring horses back into our lives. So just a few months later, we sold our home in Birmingham and planned to move up here where we are now. Within just a few months, I had purchased my first horse in over a decade. This horse was a beautiful appendix quarter horse, and I named him Copper. He stood 15.3 hands high. Then the search for a horse to match him was a challenge. I traded several more horses before I landed on a little Morgan I fell in love with and named him General. My husband took over Copper, riding him, and we had ridden these two together for 13 years, and I'd ridden General almost the entire time. After riding him so long, I had fallen in love with the Morgan breed, and I knew I would need another one. General wouldn't last forever, so I went on the search to get another one, and I found one almost identical to him, size, personality, and everything, just by looking at a picture, and I adopted him and named him Admiral. I eventually discovered that Admiral was actually a pure Lippet Morgan. Lippets are rare, and I learned that Lippets are a critically endangered breed. So I decided I had to do something to try to help save this wonderful breed. And the search began. I had to find a Lippet mare if I was going to help continue the breed. And I had a friend who had a beautiful little Lippet stallion, and so she bred them, but she never settled. So the lady I bought her from, she had had a beautiful little colt named Oakwalkie Elton, and I said, can I please trade her for him? And she said yes. So I got him home, named him Colonel. couple of years later, Colonel was old enough. We bred him to 2 Lippet mares. The first one was Primrose Treasures Untold, and the second one was actually her daughter, Venturous Joy. So after we'd bred the 2 mares, we had fallen on hard times and seriously considered breaking the lease on Joy and returning her to her owner. But before we went through with it, I talked to Willie and he said, Sherry, don't do it. Do not do it. She might throw the prettiest baby you've ever seen. And sure enough, she had the very first Pinto Lippet Morgan. I had already chosen the name for the first colt we had here, Xavier. So I named him Whirlwind Acres Xavier, but I also call him Cowboy. Everybody knows him by Cowboy. Because of his unique coloration, a Lippet historian told me, you, my dear, today have made history.
See, me and him gonna make a team one day. He's a sweet boy. We're gonna make a good trail riding team.